Recently we were speaking about the Lurianic reform in the Kabbalah, and we stated that it was revolutionary enough to split the Jews into a number of parties. Firstly, there was the reactionary party that was demanding that the new religious law be based on common folk understanding of piety, and that religious leaders rather be reborn in the spirit of piety than carry on searching for Daath, knowledge on the unknowable Godhead. What an absurd. When it comes to the situation of issues concerning Yahweh, Simson and the Qlippothic, reactionary thinkers preferred to base further explanations on denial mechanism. On one hand, they explained the imperfect nature of the world with tzimtzumim and shattering of vessels, but on the other hand, they denied these things being rooted in Yahweh's imperfection or mistake. So even if the rhetorics were still full of Almighty God notion, it was this inevitable latent sort of acknowledgement of the imperfection of Jewish God that brought the representatives of this party closer to this God. And at the other end of the scale, there was the Progressive Party that in its most radical manifestations was proclaiming that the arising force of Daath, identified mostly as human reason, will reveal all mysteries of God to man, so that the dark days of ignorance and superstition be over. It is clearly visible that these two radical parties were not only on the same scale, but also just seemingly different. Yahweh always tricks people into believing his lies, the most effective way he can find. And if you have an inclination to be spiritual, he can take advantage of you. And if you have an inclination to be rational, he can still take advantage of you. As you understand, neither of these two tendencies mentioned was pleasant to the organized Jewish religious bureaucracy of that time. The rabbis were really pissed off by the whole discussion destabilizing the religious system and undermining their authority. But they, as representatives of the hierarchical system, being in service and the disposal of Yahweh the Demiurge, were the same as those they were so angry at. The whole conflict was petty and spurious. Direct followers of Isaac Luria, however, seemed to be more interested in actual spiritual work within the system of Kabbalah. Such were the roots of Jewish Gnosticism. In resemblance to their Christian likes, for instance, these Jewish Gnostics were convinced that existence was only an illusion and appearance and did not truly exist. They further claimed that Ein Sof didn't change at all in itself, and was exactly the same as it was before creation, and there was no space empty of God. Therefore, they said, in truth there was no reality to existence at all, and all the worlds were only an illusion and appearance, just as in the verse, "In the hands of the prophets I will appear," from the second book of Kings. They said that the world and humanity had no real existence, and their entire reality was only an appearance. So they said people perceived themselves as if they were in the world, and they perceived themselves with their senses, and they perceived the world with their senses. It turned out, according to this opinion, that all of the existence of humanity and the world was only a perception and not in true reality, for it was impossible for anything to exist in true reality, since God fills all the worlds. But who is exactly the God spoken about? For when it comes to Yahweh as a deity, he in fact represents the driving force that stood behind the two already mentioned creative acts. Firstly, withdrawal of divine energy from a certain point to create the cosmic vagina. Secondly, penetration of this cosmic vagina with the so-called ray of divine light to leave the seed of Yahweh therein, so that the cosmic vagina would disgorge the stars, planets. Planetary connotations of both the Sephiroth and the Qlippothic are also worthy of investigation. Then galaxies, dinosaurs, people, and all that stuff. So Yahweh is a phallic deity, an inseminator who is interested in creation according to his image and like himself. He cannot be identified with the God filling all the worlds, and acknowledgement of this is the core and the foundation of the left-hand path as the cult of the true and unknowable God. With this, I do not intend to identify the development of the left-hand path as a direct result of Lurianic reform within the Kabbalah. Do not think that the left-hand path is somehow embedded in this one culture. Lurianic Kabbalah was one of the impulses that accelerated the development of the Qlippothic magic as a particular left-hand path tradition. The left-hand path, however, exists within, or can we say against, every culture, because culture, using the language of Kabbalah, is a product of the Sephirotic realm, whilst the left-hand path is a direct result of the activity of the Qlippothic forces. The left-hand path is using the concepts of Lurianic Kabbalah to the same extent as it uses many chronologically older or younger concepts of diverse cultural roots. The Qlippothic realm is older than the Sephirotic realm. Even though the left-hand path uses the symbolic language of cosmic poetry, cosmic mythology, and cosmic music, its products are potent tools meant to reveal, by being transcended, the esoteric truth, which is the truth about Ein Sof, as it had always been before it was constricted, so that a single ray of light, or, could be used to penetrate the artificial vacant space, and of Shekhinah, the female attribute of the presence of God, mistreated and separated from the realm of Sephiroth. The truth that the elder realm of Qlippothic still holds a memory of. The essential idea behind the left-hand path magic is that of the most extreme Gnosticism. Not only the material universe is an illusion and an appearance, but also it is made on purpose by somebody malevolent, a broken golem robot spreading his false matter. We should, however, be aware of the keys that hide under the surface of the visible phenomena, and have the guts to dig into the surface to find them. The trap of self-righteous martyrdom, or exalted spirituality, or excuses for not doing actual shit, is the same as that of sacrificing one's life to the pursuit of earthly success within the circle of samsara. Be a successful and happy beast if that brings you forward spiritually, if that helps you accumulate more willpower to open the gates or unveil the mystery. The demiurge is a plagiarizer. If you find a particular tool to get free from his influence, he will try his best to substitute it with a useless copy. So if you have a psychological need to escape from the hardships of reality into a comforting spiritual world of yours, chances are you live a lie. You are in the labyrinth, in the artificial vacant space, and you need to trace back, not pray deities. It is the Platonic whole that we really seek. The matter contains limitations, and the spirit contains limitations, and both the radical materialism and the radical monism of the spirit are demiurgic ideologies, as well as everything that has ever existed in between these two polarities. Transcend, look for keys within both. Taoism is another potent system of teachings whose usefulness to the left-hand path is yet to be fully discovered. It is free from polarities and teaches proportion. The teaching about the three jewels, and particularly the issue of transmutation, is something that when properly understood and applied can provoke the same alchemical results as working with chakras to transcend the limitations of different spiritual qualities, or working with Qlippothic and respective deities thereof, to reverse the process of concretization and contamination of Aura Ein Sof by the demiurge. When it comes to transmutation within Taoist tradition, I practically mean the transmutation of essence, Jing, sperm fluid, into breath, Qi, vitality, air, then into spirit, Shen, God form, deity. Finally refining spirits and reverting to emptiness. The teaching about the three jewels also corresponds quite directly to the Platonic triad, with emptiness being the whole, spirit being the soul, breath being the mind, and the essence, Jing, being further concretization of the mind, so thought made flesh. Within Taoism, within the Taoist system, both intelligent sexual practices and sexual abstinence serve the sublimation, serve the cause, the purpose of sublimation and transmutation of the essence, Jing, of which I will speak more in detail in the videos to come. Modern mechanistic pseudoscience has mostly reduced the former, meaning the intelligent sexual practices, to the level of techniques aimed at increasing male sexual stamina, just like it has reduced yoga to the level of fitness activity. Indeed, semen and other vital fluids were considered by the wise men of Taoism a timeless treasure that one should rather keep from being wasted in the process of some intemperate behavior. But it is in reference to the cosmogony where we find the wider meaning of this theory. You see, there is still no space empty of God. Within the true unknowable God, this primordial giant, the monad, the three jewels have always been indivisible and indistinguishable. It is and remains a closed circle, the primordial chaos. The monad is also monoecious. It is a pair of inseparable polarities, pulling infinitely towards one another. The Sumerian Tiamat and Abzu. There isn't any real existence to the creation separate from it, other than an illusory one, or as in Sumerian Ama Ushum Ana, the one that has been conceived in a bad dream of the god. We can say that the demiurge is a mare. Both Swedish mar drömmar, meaning nightmare, and the Greek moros, meaning doom, come from the same ancient Aryan root mare that was concretized enough to be able to cause an inhalation of the cosmic giant, Tsimtsum, and then the cosmic pollution, the spread of Jing into the vacant space that was formed as a result of this inhalation. The Qlippothic realm is older than the Sephirotic realm we live in. At the instant when amidst the vast ocean of chaos, a vacant space came into being, and when Aura Ein Sof, the light without end, was constricted by the demiurge mare to a single ray of light, the eternal and beautiful body of the cosmic giant started creating antibodies for this sickness. Thus the anti-cosmic universe B was created, with the sole purpose to reverse the possible results of malevolent demiurgic concept. Because these possible results were known to the true God prior to their occurrence, every possibility was contained within him, her, itself. We use letter B when we refer to the universe B or Sitra Ahra, or the notion of Sitra Ahra as the other side. The notion of the other side only to signify that it is unlike the world that we live in, that it is something other, something different, rather than chronology. It's not like there was first universe A and then universe B. which is something very important to remember. The shattering of the vessels was in fact a result of the activity of the Qlippothic forces, not the root of their existence. Before the creation of the Sephirotic realm, the true God knew what kind of its aspects the Demiurge is going to use as the building blocks for it. So he made the universe, called the Tree of Daath knowledge within the Kabbalah, or simply the Tree of Qlippothic. And it was like a system consisting, metaphorically speaking of course, of backup archive files that when opened with the right ware are going to reveal the true infinite potential of these aspects. The grantors of this ware were the 11 deities of the wrathful chaos, which is anti-cosmic and different than the primordial chaos, which is acosmic. Sometimes our firmware that our microcosmic tree has embedded is enough for getting to the right point, but it has to be worked with in very specific ways. This method mostly demands years of very persistent chakra work, and most people never get there this way, to be honest. So this is one of the biggest advantages of a complex syncretic system, like the system of Qlippothic yoga that I am trying to make a short summary of. The particular deities and their names are all parts of a particular cultural heritage. In case of Qlippothic magic, they are of course of Hebrew cultural heritage, so the Qlippothic deities will be partially the adversarial forces uniting from the Semitic cultural background. Partially these will be the deities of those tribes that Hebrew people were holding long-term relations with. An example of the latter is Asmodeus or Eshma Deva, whose origin is in the Avestan Indo-Aryan lore. I personally differentiate between Jews and the Hebrew, because the former signifies the religious group adhering to the Demiurge, the latter is just an ethnical group. Thomas Carlson provides in his book Kabbalah, Qlippothic and Goetic Magic some historiosophical arguments as to why the Kabbalah is in fact rather a Greek invention apprehended by the Jews and embedded in their culture later on in an adjusted version more in line with the assumptions of the Jewish demiurgic religion rather than their own invention. I recommend to read that, especially because that would be too big an aside for this lecture. You probably see the connections at this point between Kabbalah and chakras and the Taoist elementals and the Platonic ideas, this concept different culturally, yet uniting from the same source metaphysically. Moreover, deities in different traditions are unique from a cultural point of view, but they all unite from the same source, and it is their demiurgic, cosmic or anti-cosmic or acosmic parameters that are really significant from the left-hand path perspective. Anti-cosmic realm is of course the one that brings about destruction and decomposition, but these are means to restore the purity of primordial pandimensional universe. So we can say about the minor and the major left-hand path, as I personally define them. The minor left-hand path is the first stage. It is the stage of separation from demiurgic influence to the maximum possible extent. It is a path of self-deification and rebellion against all norms, the triumph of will, and becoming the incarnation of the archetype of Satan, the adversary. And it's okay if this is the only thing you really focus and strive to. There are lots of people who are really skeptical about the existence of anything greater, and I fully understand how it is not enough sometimes in scale of one life to accomplish the aforementioned goals. But there is also a major goal, and it's the goal of the major left-hand path. Yeah, the left-hand path has also a potential to reach transcendence, which we were speaking about so many times. So it is basically a merger with the true God, and it is dissolving within this absolute. That the destructive aspects and the rebellious aspects of Satanism are only a tool to achieve. So then this is how I look at this personally. And I think that it is very important that we bear in mind that that the demiurge was driven by seeking separation from and manifestation outside chaos. But Satan exists only in order to return all, himself included, to that same chaos. And this is why the whole tree of death exists, or tree of Daath, or tree of knowledge, or tree of Qlippothic. And this is the purpose why the microcosm within you actually holds these chaotic aspects within, this chaotic potential, this liberating potential. So beginning with the next video of this series, we will already test on concrete aspects, concrete attributes to work with, because it's enough of this summary. So take care. Thanks for watching.